much further and doing a dynamic job. I like to call him Bishop Weems. Thank you so much for being such a great support for us and hosting us here at your wonderful church. Before we get started, I want to share with you, maybe rehearse for some of you who've heard it before, that when Clergy for Prison Reform was founded in 2015, it was meant to do something very specific. Many of our churches have prison ministries. We pray for, support those who have been in prison, are in prison, returning from prison. But there was a gap in terms of advocating for the changing of laws that address prisons, the incarcerated, and the criminal justice system in general. And so Clergy for Prison Reform's primary ministry focus was to engage folks like these who are on in the pulpit with us to talk about the kinds of laws that were being passed, to ensure that better laws were being made, because how many understand that when we do prison ministry, when we go visit relatives in prison, they are being governed, if you will, by laws that folks like this pass and the governor signs into law. And if we have bad laws, there are bad results for the people that we love, right? We have good laws and better laws. That means that it impacts us in different ways. And so these have been some lawmakers who have both helped pass some good laws, or at least introduce some good laws. And so we want to celebrate them and thank them. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves by giving your name, the district you represent in the House or the Senate, and kind of what area of the state that represents. We'll start with you.
First of all, thank you guys for having us up here. This is a topic that is obviously extremely important, particularly for our community, because it affects our community obviously at an alarming rate than it does some of my other colleagues' communities. And so I think this is great. I think it's always good to inform individuals of what we're doing, what we're fighting against, and then of course what we're trying to promote and advance as well. My name is Daryl Porter Jr. I represent Mississippi's 98th House District. Right down the road from y'all over in Southwest Mississippi is Pike and Walthall counties. I also serve as the vice chair for the House Democratic Caucus. I do serve on accountability, efficiency, and transparency, where I'm the vice chair. I serve on public utilities, public health, gaming, Judiciary B, which does a lot of work around the topic that we're discussing today. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. My name is Fabian Nelson, and I'm visiting you guys from the 66th District, which is the southern portion of Hinds County. So I represent Jackson, Byram, Terry, Raymond, and Utica. It's great to be here. I also serve alongside Representative Porter on Judiciary B. That's one of the most boring committees, but it's one of the committees where we have a lot of criminal justice stuff happening. And so that's why I chose to be on that committee, because that's how you be effective. It's not about being on fun and pretty committees. And so I enjoy being on Jud B. Happy to be here to talk about a topic that we really need to shed some light on. When we talk about incarceration, Mississippi, we have the highest incarceration rate in the country. And guess what? Black men make up the highest population of the community. And so for us to, be at that in the state that we're in, we got to start talking about it and doing something. So thank y'all for having us.
Thank you all again for having us as well this morning. My name is Juan Barnett, State Senator, District 34. My Senate district is Jasper, Jones, and Forest counties. I am the chair of corrections in the Senate. I also serve on appropriations, Jud A, Jud B, Enrolled Bills, where I'm the co-chair. I serve on energy. So many other committees that I serve on. And I'm also the vice chair of the Mississippi Black Caucus. It's good to be here with you all this morning.
Thank you. Let's celebrate all of our legislators who are here with us today. So Senator Barnett, I believe you would be the senior among each of these gentlemen here. You've been in the legislature how many years?
January will be 10 years.
10 years. So you have seen both some of the, you've been around since some of the previous reforms were enacted, or at least you saw the results of some of those reforms. You've also introduced some legislation yourself over the last few years, including more recently the shutting down of parchment. Can you talk about kind of your decade in the Senate and changes, both good and bad, that you've seen around criminal justice and prison reform in Mississippi?
Sure, no problem. You know, if I'm allowed enough time, I think I may need to just share an experience prior to serving in the legislature that I did not see happening, but gave me a different perspective when I got to the legislature as it evolves around criminal justice reform. In 1991, as a 19-year-old, I found myself in the middle of Desert Storm. Right out of high school, I joined the Army, stationed in Germany, got a call, hey, your unit is going to Desert Storm. This was in 1990. Well, 1991, we're still there deployed, and Super Bowl Sunday of 1991, my father was murdered while I was over in Iraq. Of course, I didn't find that out until the Wednesday after. So being the eldest child, I had to fly home. We buried my father, but I did continue his wishes, and that was to continue to do that I had started out. And so my mission was to continue to go and serve with my fellow comrades that I left with. But in the midst of all of that, it still troubled me because my father was murdered, and I feel like the justice system let myself and my family down because the person that murdered my father basically got a hand slap on the wrist. And for decades, I'm talking 20 years or better, I would always find myself, every time I got summoned to jury duty, I would always raise my hand and tell the judge, I can't serve on your jury duty. And they would ask me why, and I would just tell them, you know, my father was murdered and nothing happened, so in my eyesight, everyone is guilty in my eyesight. I didn't care if they stole a pack of bubble gum. I didn't care what they did. I felt like everybody should go to jail forever and ever. That's how I felt. I'm sorry. And one day I just happened to be sitting at my mom's house in the garage, just me and myself, just sitting there. And it's like the good Lord spoke to me. And he said, Juan, if you expect to move from this place to this place, then you have to forgive and let me handle this. And it was at that point where I just said, God, I'm just going to leave it in your hand. And at that moment, things in my life began to change. And years went on, and I find myself in the Mississippi State Senate. And one of the first things that I thought about is when I went there is, how can I help? And it's like the good Lord spoke to me, and he said, I've put you in this place for a purpose. And your purpose is to help those that can't help themselves. And I asked the good Lord, who are we talking about? He said, I'm talking about those people that are incarcerated. And my question is, how do I help those people? And he said, you are a victim, but you are able to understand that there is power in forgiveness. And if you are the one that can talk to your legislative body about how important it is to forgive, then I think that we can start seeing some change in criminal justice reform. And that's when I started my criminal justice reform deal in the Senate. And I'm just proud to say that in the last 4 years that we have made some major accomplishments when it comes to criminal justice reform. I have authored bills that have been signed by the governor that allows individuals now when they are released from prison to where if they are released and are employed, they don't have to miss work on Monday to go and see their probation officer. They don't have to miss work the next week on Wednesday to go in city probation office, because I understand that when they miss work, then they miss a payday. When they miss work, then the employer starts to look at them sideways. When they miss work, it hurts their family. So we need to tear down some of these barriers that hinders people from getting out, finding employment, and keeping employment. So now if they are working and employed, then their employers can automatically drug test them. Their employers can make it payroll deductible for any supervision fee that they're going to have to pay the probation officer also. And they don't have to go into the probation office. They get to stay at work, because to me, when a man is able to stay at work and stay employed versus leaving at 1 o'clock with his head down because he feels like everybody in the place knows that he has to go and see his probation officer, that makes a difference in a person's life. So they're able to do those things. Now, that's one barrier that we remove. Then we have this bill that's out there now with individuals who are incarcerated now with 2 years left on their sentence can actually work every day while they're incarcerated. Make a livable, make a real wage. Whatever company is paying free people to come to work, they have to pay these individuals the same thing. These individuals are allowed to keep 50% of their monies in a savings account that they can't touch until they leave prison. Nor can Mississippi touch their money. This is their money that they work for. 25% of the monies that they earn is being used to pay fines, fees, restitution, child support, those type of things while they're incarcerated. So now when they get out, most of them don't have that to worry about because they're caught up on their child support. 15% of the money goes back to the state of Mississippi for getting them to and from work and administrative stuff that has to happen. And 10% they get to keep in their pocket to spend at their pleasure on things that they may need while they're still incarcerated. This has helped so many of those young men and young women. Now they have real money when they get out, more than $20 in a bus ticket to basically say, I'll see you back here in 6 months. They get to use what they have been trained to do, and they got a job. They don't have to worry about getting out and going filling out an application and the employer telling them, well, I'm sorry, but because you are what your past say you were, not who you are, because your past should not say who you are today. That's who you were on yesterday. And it just helps so many people to be able to do those things. But I just thank God that he showed me the power of forgiveness, you know. And I'm not the one that's advocating that everybody should get out of prison, because there are some that are there that need to be there. Let's be honest about that. But we do have to realize that there are a lot of young men and young women who made a one-time mistake in their life. And it shouldn't haunt them for the rest of their lives. I'm sorry, Bishop, that I took up so much of your time.
I'm thankful for you telling that backstory, because I want to speak to that in for just a moment. I think the stories we bring with us in leadership influence how we lead and how we serve. Had you not had that talk with the Lord and had that opening to forgiveness, you would be trying to lock everybody up and throw away the key. And so let's celebrate God for offering this space for forgiveness and how that's influenced you. Do either of you representatives have a similar story about how something in life has impacted or influenced how you legislate, how you engage your colleagues, particularly those who may be across the aisle or maybe on the same side of the aisle but have a very different posture on reform?
Well, you know, the thing about it is, as Senator said, you have to have a story and you have to tell your story. And I remember mine began when I was in 9th grade. So I grew up in Yazoo City, born and raised up there. And as you probably know, we got a federal prison in Yazoo City. It's the biggest economic driver in Yazoo, unfortunately. And as they were building the prison, they decided that they were going to get expanded to start, housing females. Well, right across the field from my high school is where they were building the actual cells that they were going to house the females in. And I remember sitting in class one day in English class, Teacher said, y'all look out the window over there. We looked out the window. She said, they're building those cells for y'all. And so when she said that, that sat in me, and I was like, you know what? We gotta do something to make things better. One of my classmates, after we graduated in 2003, he killed his stepfather, life in prison. He's there because he didn't have any intervention. He was a troubled kid growing up, very smart. But if he had had the intervention, it possibly would not have happened. And so that's what made me say, we gotta fight. I wanna make sure that my other people in the Delta, they have a role model, someone to look up to, someone that's fighting for me every day. So that's a little bit about mine.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's powerful.
I don't have a story per se, but just opening my eyes to what's around us and what's happening, while people are getting their lives taken from them for committing very minor crimes, from looking at the crimes that this state and that really the country imposes on people, and it, again, affecting people of color more so than anybody else. And so, just seeing that and having a drive to do something to combat it and turn that around. And so, again, grateful to serve with these gentlemen who have that same mindset. I did not know that story about Senator Barnett, and I am grateful to have been here today and heard that backstory about forgiveness and it helping you, lead the charge really in the Senate to combat what I like to call the evils of the legislature, and to advance in the advancement of making sure that we take care of the people in Mississippi.
So a couple of questions have come to mind. First, when Representative Nelson was talking about that Yazoo City story, it made me think about the fact that so many persons who get caught up in the system also grow up in communities that don't have the resources that they need, or not as many resources as they need, or they may come from situations that bad things happened to them as they were growing up. And so I can think of stories similar to that of you're in a school district and folks are saying, well, most of y'all can probably go to prison, or even the way they do schooling. It sort of, if you look at how you're lining up and holding your hands a certain way, all this kind of stuff is like, just in case y'all get arrested, y'all going to do the same thing over there in the corrections facility. So we're talking about reforming prison systems, criminal justice system. What are some other things regarding economics and other dynamics in the legislature that you all look at to say, if we resolve these issues, this will also kind of help what's going on in terms of criminal justice?
Well, and you hit the nail dead on the head about education, because we know it all starts with education. And I can remember some years ago at my high school, the students at the school decided one morning that they would just protest. And they protest because in about a 5-year period, they had about 6 principals at the school. And the kids wanted true leadership. And if you get one principal in there, they want you to walk down the hallway on the right side. You get another one, they want you to walk on the left side. You get one, maybe want you to walk in the middle. One wants you to run, one wants you to walk. So the kids were just confused, so they decided, you know what, if the parents can't hear us pleading for help, then maybe if we protest, then the school district will hear us pleading for help. And they did this. But to my surprise is that the school district basically turned their back on the children. And that's a problem that we have in our school system, is because I feel like some of the times that, it's not the same, school is not the same as it was when you and I don't know how old you all are, and I won't say how old I am, but I'm sure if I keep talking, somebody will figure that out here in a little bit. But when we were in school, there was no such thing as detention and in-school suspension and all of those type of things, because we had teachers that lived in the community, that knew the people in the community and could do the things to you at school that you hope, like, you know what, that mom and daddy didn't find out when you got home from school. But now they have taken all of those things away, and they said, well, we're going to put you in school suspension, and we're going to do these things, and we're going to do these things. And to me, when I look at it, especially being the chair of corrections, I see so many similarities between the schoolhouse and the jailhouse. From going to breakfast, from going to lunch, from how you exchange classes, how they are able to walk up and down the hallways. And when I walk into a school and I see all the kids being herded into a classroom and I hear the door close, to me it sounds like a sale closing on them. So we have to start, in my opinion, we have to get more involved in our education. Because if we don't get more involved in our education, then we're going to see an increase in incarceration. So the less education we have, the more incarceration we're going to have. And I think that should be something that we should all be talking about, is not just adequately funding education, but how do we make education better and not make our classrooms look like a jail cell.
That's good, because we've talked for years about the school to prison pipeline, or the cradle to prison pipeline, and so there are things going on in school districts and in communities that kind of set some young people up for failure. Yep. Representative Porter.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with that. Of course, yes, it starts with education. And now this past session, we allocated $240 million to education, which is, with the changes of formula, is now been fully funded. I'm curious to see if we're going to allocate another $240 million plus the adjustment for inflation and whatnot and insurance next year. But there's a push in this state right now, at least on our side, for vouchers and for school choice. That is a push to dismantle public education. And that's something that we all need to be aware of. We do a lot of offensive playing in the legislature, but we do a whole lot of defensive playing as well. Constantly, always combating and fighting against bad legislation that, again, adversely affects our community more so than any other community. As it relates to the economy, and we need to be focused on and continue fighting for putting bringing those resources to our areas, to our communities, because when you got bad school districts, you have an impoverished area. You got an impoverished area, you see a high rate of crime. And so we have to start fighting, continue fighting to make sure that the next big economic development project can come to our areas. And that's a fight. That's a struggle in the state legislature. We see it every single year where there are big economic developments, what we've been dubbing, you don't see anything come west of I-55. Southwest Mississippi has gone without for so long. I won't speak for Fabian for this last year he's been there, but since I've been there, you've had economic development projects put right outside, in Hinds County, right outside the predominantly black area of Hinds County, where it benefits the school where the students are predominantly white. And just less than a mile away from the school district that is predominantly black. And so, again, we gotta continue fighting to bring those resources, those economic development projects to our areas, and we have to take a close keep a lookout for things like vouchers and school choice. Again, things that are only dismantling public education. In my humble opinion, it's just another way of segregating our school system, because the private school right now, I think we passed that bill where they can select who comes to their school district. Well, yeah, they're gonna take that athlete. They're absolutely gonna take that athlete, but they're not gonna take anybody else. And so we gotta be careful, and we gotta keep our eyes open for that push to, again, in my opinion, dismantle public education.
Let me park there just before Representative Nelson gets in, because you just said something about You think about private schools, you think about the public charter schools when, if you will, the cream of the cream leaves the public schools, and you're left with a larger number of students who need even more assistance, even more help. And then it becomes a bigger struggle on teachers and principals and whatnot. And the school system keeps going down, and they will blame the district, will blame the school, and not think about, well, what's going on to where we're, at the end of the day, the majority of Mississippians will be educated in public schools. Hands down. The majority of our citizens will be educated in public schools, but may have less of the resources, maybe not financial resources, but human resources, intellectual capital, all of that. If all that goes away to other places that already have a leg up in the first place, it makes it even tougher for areas like Southwest Mississippi or the urban core in Jackson. And I guess even to some part, Byram, now that, a lot of that South Jackson population is moving into Byram. So, definitely add what you wanted to share, but, even piggyback on that piece about the intentional or unintended consequences of such policies that could further exacerbate criminal justice issues because we're dealing with kind of pulling out from these communities.
Absolutely. When you think about thriving communities, one thing you're going to see there is a strong school district. Now, as Representative Porter said, and I know you were talking about Continental plant. So we have a Continental tire plant that came to the Hinds County area maybe 5-6 years ago. Well, what happened, it's in Clinton, but guess what? When the plans were made, that was not Clinton. That was Bolton, Mississippi. What they did, they came in and annexed that piece of Bolton, Mississippi to make it Clinton. And when they did that, they built the plant, and Clinton school districts got about $12 million up front to go into their schools. Now, had that not happened, that would have been money that would have come into the Hinds County School District. I mean, Clinton has state-of-the-art schools right now. And so the games that they play is what's hurting our communities. Now, another thing it boils down to is leadership. How can somebody come in and annex a city and to blind eyes? If we had leaders that were there to stop that and shed some light on it, it would not have happened, and we would have had money coming back to our school district. Now, I'm going to take y'all back a little bit.
Can I interject right there? I want to ask you to tease that out a little bit because in a certain sense, Representative Porter was talking about kind of the partisan divide. But what I think I hear you say, there were leaders in Bolton who just let that happen.
Absolutely.
And those leaders look like...
Absolutely.
Okay. So sometimes I ain't just the other folks.
Yes, sir. The skin folk ain't kin folk out there.
Yes.
But that's true. And what we have to do is we have to start calling things out that are happening like that. We have to find the root of the problem. And I don't mind saying, I said, look, I might get in trouble for this. I don't care. We got to start letting people know what the truth is, because our people are suffering. And there's nothing worse than our own people hurting our own. And now I'm going to go back a step further.
Yeah, clap for that. I'll clap for that.
And I'm going to go back talking about education. How many of y'all have seen the movie Lean on Me? And so on the cafeteria scene, when Joe Clark goes in the cafeteria and they have the cages up, he tells them, if you treat them like animals, they're going to behave like animals. When we look at our schools, if we are putting environments that are non-conducive to education, how are our children going to learn? Back when I grew up, teachers, that was a profession that it was, like high society. They took pride in education. Now, in our public schools, they get anybody that's breathing that want to come in and teach a class. And so we have lowered the standard in our public schools, and it's not doing our children justice.
I just want to go back to earlier when I talked about the students decided that they needed to do what the parents should have been doing. And a lot of times when we blame education, we blame the schoolhouse and everybody involved in the schoolhouse. But as a community, we have to realize that a lot of the problem starts in our own house. So we can't blame the schoolhouse for something that we don't do in-house. And I see that a lot too. And you know, my day job is to work for AT&T. And and it hurts me so bad when I pull up to a gas station or something to get gas and decide I want to go in and get a Coke or a Snickers bar or something that I don't need either one of them. But they both taste good to me, but I know they ain't good for me. But I'm sure I'm not the only one that's guilty of that this heat. But it bothers me in the summers and stuff when I see these kids are out of school. And I see 3 or 4 young black men standing there with $2. And there's 1 soda and 1 bag of potato chips. And I'm looking at 5 young men standing there. And I'm asking myself, how is this going to feed 5 young men? And I'm thinking to myself, if they leave here, 1 or 2 things is going to happen. Either there's going to be a fight on the outside because somebody's not going to get in it, and they're going to fight for it. Or the one that's got it is going to run like you know what, so he don't have to share it with anybody else. And so many times I would just tell them, the rest of y'all, just go get what you want, and I'll pay for it. Because I'd rather spend that $5 today to potentially keep them from starting a career in jail. And I think that's what a lot of us should start to do, is that when we recognize those things while they're young in our own community, there's an opportunity for all of us at some point to intervene. And it doesn't always have to be at the gas station. It can be at the grocery store, it could be at the football game, it could be anywhere, but there's always an opportunity for us to intervene, because I just prayed that one of those young men that I was able to buy a bag of potato chips for or a soda don't have to necessarily find me to thank me personally, but can one day look back at what I did for them and decide to do the same thing for someone else. See, my criminal justice thing is not just about getting people out of prison that's been in prison so that they can have a head start when they leave the place. My criminal justice reform is around making sure that we don't continue to send them to prison so that they don't have to fight so hard, because we already know as black men, it's always a fight. There's always something that we feel like we have to be fighting for. And that's my whole thing around criminal justice. And going back to education, I've always wondered 2 things about education. Number 1 is that we don't want you to have a Bible in school nowhere, but we're going to give you a whole stack of them if you get to prison. We don't want to spend $3,000 a year to educate a child, but we'll spend $30,000 a year to incarcerate one. Now, that's a problem.
Yes, sir.
When we have to come in and fight for a $240 million bill to fully fund education, and we fuss and fight about how we going to have this formula right, but then we could sit there and sign off on a $400 million bill for incarceration and nobody says a word about it, we got a problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you raised a number of great points. The last point in particular, and it speaks to why Clergy for Prison Reform was founded, that moral element. If you're all downtown Jackson, debating about laws and whatnot, one can argue it is immoral to fight over how to fully fund education, but not have a fight at all about funding incarceration. Like the fact that we're not even thinking about the fact that we're putting too much money in doing something that could have been prevented on the front end if we educate and feed and provide adequate health care and all those other things, so that less folks either find themselves falling into the system or finding that as an attractive lifestyle, right? The other thing pointed out, and I think is very important, is that as good of work that you all do legislatively, whether it's to finally get a bill passed or to just fight to raise the conversation, it's not legislation alone, right? It's going to take everybody doing their part. And so in one sense, those of us in the room, I think we have to do as good or a better job of supporting folks like this who are actually doing the work, and then vote out folks who are not doing the work they need to do, but also holding ourselves accountable as a community to say, what are we doing along the way to make sure that our young people are not caught up? And let me also back up a little bit. We've been talking about young people. It's not just young people who get caught up in the system. There are a lot of older people too as well. But Representative Porter, you actually brought up, you said this language about the evils of the legislature. But a lot of us, if we weren't poli-sci majors, or we weren't, we're not attorneys. Some of us, how many of y'all ever been to the state capitol building? Okay, right. So there are a lot of folks who don't even know, they've never been inside of it, don't know what y'all do. Can we just kind of do a little bit of, you were talking about our ages. There used to be the schoolhouse rock. They just talk about how a bill becomes a bill. Yeah, just a bill. Yeah, can you talk about what's a bill and how does a bill become a bill?
Sure. If I miss a step, I'm sure my colleagues will pop right in. First, you got to have an idea. You have an idea, and then you put that idea to paper, and that is drafted into a bill. At least for me, I like to get my drafted legislation before I submit it, and I like to go through it. I like to talk to different advocates about it, different stakeholders about that piece of legislation to see if anything needs to be taken away, added, or if the whole thing just needs to go away. And then after you have that bill, you take it to the speaker's office, or we got a hopper. You drop that bill by a certain deadline. The bill then goes into the speaker's office, and then he makes the decision as to what committee that bill will go to. Now, it doesn't take long to figure out whether the speaker wants to intentionally kill your bill, or if he has an inkling on letting it stay alive.
And then right there, what's a kill a bill and let a bill live?
To kill a bill means it goes away. Well, we also got a saying in the legislature: a bill's not dead until it's dead. And so in sine die, which means the session is over. And so a bill's not dead until he bangs the gavel last day of the session and say sine die. And I don't know if you want me to get into all the weeds of that, but basically, even if a bill is killed on the onset, if you're smart enough and clever enough, you can find code sections in other bills. And if those code sections are open, then you can take your piece of legislation that once was dead and bring it back alive through that code section. And to be honest with you, at least for a Democrat, someone in the minority, that's a lot of ways we get our legislation passed. It's making amendments and inserting our dead legislation into some living legislation, thus bringing our legislation alive and getting it to the governor's desk and sign. So to go back to the speaker killing or advancing a bill, you usually can tell pretty quickly whether or not he wants it to live or not, because it's his job to determine where that bill goes as far as the committees are concerned. If I have a bill about education and he refers it to corrections, education, and judiciary B, he likely wants my bill to die. But if I have a bill about education and he sends it to education, he wants to at least have a chance to live. Now, then it becomes the bill is now in the hands of the chairman of that committee. And the chairman makes a decision whether or not he wants to bring the bill out or he wants the bill to die. If he brings it before the committee in our state legislature is going to be majority Republican, and a couple of Democrats sprinkled in there. And so then it becomes the will of the committee. But let me be clear about how it really works. If that chairman wants that bill to come out, it's gonna come out. Point blank, period. Whether the Republican members like it or not, if the chairman says this bill has to come out, it's coming out. And so then once it leaves the committee, it goes then to the House floor for the entire body to vote on. Depending on whether it's a 3/5 vote or majority vote, at that point in time, power then goes back into that chairman's hands again. He decides whether or not he wants to bring that bill up to the House floor for a vote, or if he doesn't. If he doesn't bring it up, it dies. So let's say the House votes for that piece of legislation, it passes, it then goes to the Senate side, and it goes through the entire process again, except it's the lieutenant governor that's deciding what committee, it's those Senate chairmen that's decided whether or not it's going to live or die in the committee, and if they're going, it's their decision whether or not they're going to bring it to the House floor and let it die. Now, let's say it makes it through the Senate, and let's say they've also sent they do the exact same thing on their end, their bill comes over to us, and it goes through that process I just went through. And let's say we have the same piece of legislation, but we just can't agree on different aspects of that bill. So at that point, it goes to conference. Now, this is what's really interesting. You take a bill out of the hands of 174 members collectively, and you put it into the hands of 6 people. And they make the determination of that piece of legislation that may have went in as an education bill, but it may come out as a corrections bill. And it's in the hands of 3 people, 3 from the Senate side, always typically gonna be composed of the chairman and vice chair, 3 from the House side, usually is gonna be comprised of the chairman and the vice chair and another member. Let's say they reach an agreement, those 6 reach an agreement, it then goes to the floor of each chamber. Most times you can see a conference report can be 1 sentence. And you can then see that legislation has completely been changed. It's not the same legislation that the author intended it to be. And sometimes you will see people vote against their own legislation because of that. Once it leaves, both chambers have agreed on the conference report. It then goes to the governor's office for signature or veto, or he does nothing, in which case I think it's 10 days or 5 days. 10 days. If he does nothing, then it automatically becomes law. Oh, a pocket veto. Yeah, he really don't want to sign it, but he don't want to veto it either. And so I guess sometimes to save face, he just lets it go into effect.
I want to add a little piece to that. Have y'all seen on the news about the Smith-Will Stadium in Jackson and the Attorney General demanding that Jackson deed it back to the city, to the state? And guess what? Every single legislator voted on that bill to have it done. But let me tell you how they did it. We have a bill at the end of session that goes to our Ways and Means Committee for all of our projects. So whatever projects it is we want, it goes into this bond bill. Well, the bond bill came out, and guess what? It went to conference. Well, it went in conference, and when it went in conference, they put the language in there that the state could take the stadium back. They didn't put the address of the stadium, they put the parcel number, and they worded it real fancy. They put it back out to us, and because this Ways and Means bill was probably about 400 pages, nobody took the time, and we really didn't have the time, because when it comes to you, when we get a bill, we don't have days to look at it. We literally had maybe 5 minutes. Everybody voted yes on it. Then a few weeks ago, you hear what happened. But that's how Representative Porter was talking about the way they sneak things in, because that stadium had absolutely nothing to do with a financial bond project.
And let's be clear. Not many of us are going to vote against a bill to get projects to our districts. And I would, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. I'll venture to say, had it even been found, we were going to have a fight, a struggle getting members not to vote against that bill, because it would have been them voting directly against projects and money coming into their district. And so, again, those are the games they play. We try our absolute best to stay ahead of it. But again, when you hand us a 400-page bill with 5 minutes to vote on it, and seemingly you got money coming to your district, stuff like that gets by all the time. And so again, we play a lot of offense, but by God, we play a whole lot of defense. Probably more defense than we play offense at times.
Yeah, and I thank y'all for sharing that, because a lot of times we don't, there may be this issue that we want resolved. I mean, what you just shared, the legislative session begins pretty much January, ends pretty much in April. You could have this thing, all that you just talked about, over several weeks, and it could turn on a dime. You think something's going this way up until the last week of the session, and bam, they throw a wrench in it. So you think we're about to get some major criminal justice reform bill, and then it falls apart. Or there have been times where both Republicans and Democrats support a really good comprehensive criminal justice bill. Both sides agree with it, wanted to pass, send it to the governor's mansion for the governor's signature. He vetoes it.
That's a reality. That just happened 2 years ago.
It happened 2 years ago.
Both sides, we had a good bipartisan criminal justice reform bill that we all worked on, went to the governor's desk, and he vetoed it. Now, the disappointment for me is because it was passed overwhelmingly by both, I believe, by both chambers. And when we come back to session, we have the ability to override his veto. But nobody in the leadership on either chamber were willing to go against the governor for whatever reason that may be. I have no idea, and that still bothers me now, that nobody wanted to take a stand. And when I say nobody, I'm talking about the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. Nobody wanted to take a stand and override his veto and sock it to him. And those are some of the frustrating realities about serving in the state legislature. You made me think of another good piece of legislation this year. And when I say the Senate, and I'm talking bad about them, I'm not talking about Senator Barnett. So because I'm about to say something bad about the Senate. So I'm not talking about him. But we had a piece of legislation, I think it was House Bill 609, don't quote me on the number, a piece of legislation that would restore people's voting rights back once they'd completed their time, paid their restitution, had not committed a violent crime, had not stolen any state money over $5,000. A really good piece of legislation that passed 99 to 9 on the House side. And it went over to the Senate side, and it never even got taken up. It was never even brought up for discussion in the committee. And I don't know if you guys are aware of the process now to have individuals' rights restored, but it is a very, very tedious process. I chaired the subcommittee for suffrage on the House side in Judiciary B, and I think we started off with about 60 applications for people wanting to get their rights restored. I think we actually ended up going with about 21 of them because they didn't meet the qualifications. Now, in the past, when I've done this, there was no guideline. It was whatever the chairman said it was. There was no guideline. The good thing about this session is because of the House Bill 609, we actually had something to go by to help get these people's rights restored. And the process that I just explained to you guys, it took me about 10 minutes of how a bill becomes law. That's the exact same process that each individual person has to go through in an effort to get their rights restored. And it just should not be like that.
Yeah, and you served your time, you've done all the stuff right, it's 30, 40 years later, you still can't vote. Now, mind you, there are, even with certain felonies, you can come out and still vote, but there are certain ones that are still like, you got to go through this tedious process to get one by one. And it may be 2 or 3 per year. It's not like hundreds of people get their voting rights restored. It's maybe 3 in a year. We're going to get ready to wrap up, but what's maybe the one major legislative goal that each of you may have this session, this upcoming 2025 session regarding criminal justice prison reform, or even something that may impact, it may not be directly criminal justice or prison reform, but maybe education or something else?
I plan on playing a lot of defense this year, this coming session, and as it relates to vouchers and school choice. It's no secret that it's coming, and so just this week I was in a meeting with the chairman of our House Democratic Caucus. We got to come up with a game plan. Is this being live streamed? I might be giving away secrets. Oh well, they know it anyway. We're getting ready to fight against the vouchers and school choice so we can protect our public schools. I guess this is not, and again, that we talked about how education directly affects criminal justice, the criminal justice system. But something else that's really important is Medicaid expansion in this state. You know, I'm grateful that we had a conversation about it this year. I'm grateful we actually had a piece of legislation. I'm grateful that we had a conference about it. I'm disappointed that we didn't get it across the goal line, and so that's an issue that I believe is way too important, that affects the lives of every Mississippian, for us not to come back and address it.
Two of my policy areas are harm reduction and what's all doing there? This has slipped my mind. Okay, so domestic violence, I'm sorry. So they kind of go hand in hand. So my biggest project is getting a domestic violence bill passed to establish a domestic violence fatality review committee. So when these incidences happen, we need to make sure we're coming in looking to see, are we giving proper resources to the victims? Could these instances have been avoided? So that's one of my biggest priorities. Now on the criminal justice side, I had 2 bills I worked on last session that didn't make it anywhere, but these were expungement bills. Now, the first bill was that, you know, there are certain criteria that you can go and petition the court, go through an attorney, pay fees, and get your record expunged. What I wanted to happen was, instead of an offender having to go through that, I wanted it to be done automatically if they met the criteria. Because it doesn't make any sense. If you meet the criteria, the judge is going to sign it. Why are you making them pay this $1,000, $1,500 for an expungement? Now, the second one was, I said, well, that may be a little too aggressive for, you know, the other side. So my second one was, a lot of people don't know that if you're arrested right now and you're let go, you're not found guilty, guess what? That arrest is on your record. If you're charged with a crime and you're found innocent, guess what? That's still on your record. So my second one was going to be that anybody that was not found guilty of a crime or just arrested will get an automatic expungement without having to go through the process, because there's so many people right now that are trying to get employment and they can't get a job because they had an arrest on their record. And so that one didn't make it anywhere either. So I'm definitely going to be championing and pushing both of those as well this next session.
I want to cut in right quick. I'm sorry, Senator Barnett.
It sounds like there's like beef between the House and the Senate, apparently.
No.
2-1.
I just play it.
We do have him outnumbered today, don't we? Look, that is, Fabian, I didn't know, I didn't know you dropped that. I didn't know you dropped that legislation this past session. I want to work on that piece of legislation with you, because I often I don't do a lot of criminal work in my practice. I do mostly civil work, but I do have people come to me and they want expungements. And recently, in the last 2 years, I've had a lot of people come to me that have gone to, and so I'm also saying this as a way of informing you guys that know people that go to free expungement clinics. I've done free expungement clinics, and I think they're wonderful, but I've had a lot of people come to me in the last 2 years who've gone to free expungement clinics, and the conviction has been expunged, but they fail to get rid of the arrest. The problem with that is a lot of these courts, when they expunge the conviction, they literally trash the file, literally shred it. It's gone. But the national database is still, and the national database has it updated where the conviction has been expunged, but the arrest has not been expunged. And so that will be the only thing, only proof that there was even arrest because the courts, the sheriff, the police department, it's all gone, but it becomes difficult to get that arrest expunged because there's literally no documentation in the courts, nothing with the police officers, nothing showing that the arrest ever even happened. And so it becomes difficult to nail down and get the proper documentation. And contacting the national database is not, and getting a response is not necessarily a walk in the park. Really difficult to do in order for them to send something to saying, hey, we got this arrest, and then having to take it to the court, because there's other things you have to list in the expungement to show the arrest, court documents, you have to show all that stuff so you can get it done, but it doesn't exist. Hence the problem. And so if you have loved ones or individuals in your community that are going to the free expungement clinics, just tell them, hey, make sure you include my arrest in the paperwork. And it's just as simple as writing the word arrest in the order for the judge to sign so the clerk can send off to everybody. So 100%, I want to work with you on that bill, sign on to it, do whatever we need to do to advance it, because it's too many people that have that on their record. They can't get employed as a result, and so an automatic expungement of the conviction or the arrest is something that it has to happen.
Well, my plans on this upcoming session is to reintroduce a piece of legislation that I did last year, and that is the closure of parchment. I think it's time for Mississippi to move on past parchment. And my other piece of legislation that I want to work on is to make sure that when we sentence people for mental health, that we have a place for mental health. Because we have to understand that mental health and those people are incarcerated, we often find ourselves sentencing people who have mental health issues to the Department of Corrections. And we need to really work on making sure that we provide a place for real mental health, and the Department of Corrections is not the place for those individuals with mental health. So those are two of the things there's two of the things that I want to work on personally, but it's not two of the things that I expect to be working on, because like Representative Porter said and Representative Nelson said, there's a whole lot of things that we're going to be working on across this session, but those are the two things that myself personally will be working on. Of course, I want to, if your legislation makes it to the Senate, we want to make sure that we get it to the governor and other things. But again, thank you all for inviting us to come and I know an hour is not enough, and hopefully we'll get an invite to come back and spend another hour with you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, we're going to actually invite them to come see y'all at the House,
exactly.
In the Senate.
Oh, and just a little bit of housekeeping. I know I'm outnumbered here 2-1, but if you look at how we represent the state, it's 2.3 representatives to 1 senator. So just a little bit of just to let you all know, it takes less of us.
See, that's why we have conflicts with them.
The Senate is the bougie side. That's what you're trying to say.
They are absolutely the bougie side. But we love good senators like Senator Barnett.
Let's thank our legislators for their time today. Thank you.